Welcome to my library, dear guest. My name is Cole, and I will be your storyteller. Today, I have 2 stories in store for you. I am uncertain if this video will be as long as the ones I usually make, much like the last one I put out, I believe, but things are still a little hectic. So thank you for your patience as I work all of this out. Now, let us get right into today's first story. Story number 1. That time, the DM felt like Critical Role was far more interesting than playing. On Session Time. By the author, Sigdon. Hey, I think I recognize that name. 1 second. Ah, there we go. So, hello. Second time here. This story is going to be pretty short, and compared to most of the stuff that dwells here, it's way tamer. I kinda want to post it more as an opportunity to open a bit of a debate on how D&D or other TTRPG podcasts overlap with the actual playing experience. This was from a campaign from years ago, which overlapped with far worse experiences that I talked about in another post. The campaign itself had been going on for over 30 sessions, but interest had fizzled out over time. One player left, scheduling was hard, the DM had huge issues placing the spotlight on anyone that wasn't their partner, and that stuff. Some characters had their backstories almost untouched, and another had scenes romancing an NPC every single session. We, naturally, were becoming a bit tired of the whole deal. Scheduling had been easier when people were motivated, but there was one huge logistics issue. It was an online game. Between people from 3 different continents: America, Europe, and Australia. We played at 5 p.m. on European time, which meant waking up incredibly soon for the Americans and staying up really late for the Australians. Finding the time to play was hard, and getting everyone ready for a session was a whole deal. Needless to say, people were eager to play after making the impossible to be able to meet. The DM had always been prone to chatting before the session. Some venting, but mostly chatting about the latest Critical Role episode. They often bragged how watching it made them a much better DM, and how we should watch it to improve too. The rest of the group didn't watch it, nor were interested in it, but, well, we just urged to start playing, and most of the time the sessions would start shortly after. Up until that session. We hadn't played in maybe a month or 2. We were hungering to get some action. We were expecting a bit of meat at least. DM just wasn't up to it. Instead, it turned into an hour-long talk about the podcast. People were sleepy, tired, and did not wake up or stay late to talk about something they didn't even watch. I kept insisting we should start playing at some point, and kept getting either ignored or interrupted by the DM. By the time we started playing, the session didn't really have much to it, and the DM just admitted they hadn't prepped anything at all, and kept trying to get back to the topic of Critical Role. There was a fight, and they kept forgetting rules and getting angry at the smallest things. We played for maybe 2 hours and stopped, and while memory may be failing me, that probably was the last time we did really play. We never talked about stopping the campaign, we collectively decided it wasn't worth the time, and certainly not losing hours of sleep over it. As I said, pretty short and nothing catastrophic, but it's something that I never fully understood. what's the point to playing if you're far more concerned with what celebrities are doing in their own game? Why is it so hard for some people to understand that enjoying D&D doesn't equal to enjoying certain podcasts? I'm sure there's a lot of spaces to discuss that stuff. Why take away the precious time from your own session and from your players to instead talk about other people's games? Anyways, I'm just full of questions, and maybe a bit tired of how podcasts kinda eat away the space for, actually playing TTRPGs. And how people seem to be expected to watch the podcasts to become better at the game itself. What do you think? I think a lot of people in these stories are way too obsessed with that show. In a sense that they try to replicate it, and if their own games do not reach this incredibly high bar, that it is a bad game. By the way, don't get me wrong. While I am not a regular viewer of the show, I do quite enjoy it from time to time. And the people playing are very sympathetic to me. And I think it could even help you become a better DM. Just do not think you will become Matt Mercer. Or as a player, do not expect your DM to be. Nobody is Matt Mercer, just like nobody is you. Every DM has their own stories to tell, their own dynamic with their group, their own playing style, and their own damn personality. Okay, derailed this a little bit, but back on topic. I believe every group chats before the game starts, but the entire group should be in on that. If it is only you talking about one thing the rest of the group has no interest in, then you are not respecting everyone else's time. These people meet up to play a game, which they have been waiting on for an entire month. There are so many Critical Role fans out there to talk to, but this group was looking forward to playing D&D themselves, not hear about other people doing so. All that being said, let's move on to story number 2. Story number 2. My grandma joined my open world Fallout pen and paper. By the author, Red Founder. I've told this story in other places before, but want to tell it here too, since I just joined Reddit and think you guys may enjoy it. This is less a horror story and more like chaos. Nobody was upset or hurt in this story. More shocked. We started playing a 3.5 edition D&D with a Fallout module called Exodus, and it was going pretty well. We took the living world approach, where players can roam and affect areas based on their choices in quests and travels. We were about 6 or so months in when my grandmother first asked about it further. When I told her of the sessions of my first group, I told her it was a violent, 50s post-apocalyptic game full of mean people, blood, and monsters. Normally, she has all these things. She is one of those overly religious grandmas that tends to not watch anything that drops F-bombs or shows a lot of blood. But, since she loves history, murder documentaries, 50s, and survival shows, she immediately got excited and wanted to play. I wrote her up a sheet and helped her make her character. She described her character as an elderly antiques dealer that's from Pennsylvania and was chasing a time-traveling ship named the Eldridge that went missing in the 40s. She saw a show on the real-life version and thought it would be cool to go after it in the story. She played an elderly woman that went by many names and constantly changed clothes, so it was hard to track her down. We started off calling her Grandma, but she later named her Pistol Packin' Grandma, or PPG for short, based on the song Pistol Packin' Mama. She started off with about 20 caps and an M1 Garand, since she did well with describing her antique stealer story. Wearing a long brown duster and hat, Grandma started her adventure at the Mojav, since that's where the quest began. She got a job through a caravan after showing she had high medical skills and would be valuable as a nurse. She would be riding on the caravan to a new Reno. The adventure went pretty normal, until she came across 3 guys beating up a ghoul. I began reading out the scene and how interaction works. The first she did was blow out the knee of one guy. He topples to the ground. She aims at his other knee and makes her demands.
Get your friends out and get out, or I'll blow out his other knee.
The level 1 enemies took their lead pipe and charged her. She shot a second time, blowing out his other knee. She then points at the stunned enemies.
Drop them and run. I mean it. Next shot is going to his liver.
She rolls to intimidate them with advantage, and passes with flying colors. They drop their stuff and hightailed from the area. She helped the ghoul and bandaged him up. She was rewarded lumpy fruit and went on her way to get a long rest. The next in-game day, the caravan rides for a few hours until hitting a checkpoint. It was a small military base run by the Rangers. Specifically, Rangers from another player's backstory that took over the base with him. As the lead merchant, Hank, focused on payment and paperwork, she decided to haggle for an extremely beat-up Jeep. One so bad it would easily go into a death wobble at 15 miles per hour. She is given the deal, plus full tank of gas, and didn't try to do rolls to find out if he was lying or not. Unbeknownst to her, I plan to show her how mean the wasteland can be with his side quest reward. Her job was to exterminate a mole rat nest from the museum half of the base. She was given a key and told good luck. So, to prepare, she had an idea and began to gather trash to create something I did not expect. A trash bag-based ghillie suit. Taking her place next to some garbage with a rifle and a wrench she found, she began her wait for mole rats. Once she saw where they were coming from, she decided to kill the 3 already traveling outside the nest. The first was taken out with a bullet. She missed the second and third shot. Grandma got bit twice. She shot and killed the second and immediately went for bludgeoning the last one by surprise. Getting up from her kills, she scavenged the meat and caved in the entrance to the nest and told the soldier she completed the quest. He then gave her the jeep. Except there was a problem. A superior talked to him and would only allow half a tank of gas. She attempts diplomacy but fails. The superior introduces himself as Dante and tells her he filled it up so she could be on her way. Unknown to her, he broke the gauge to always say full. She proceeded to take it and began with her travels, delighted with her far more impressive reward than what the caravan gave. A few hours later, the jeep putters to a halt and she realizes what happened. You realize your jeep is out of gas and it's about 2 days' walk to go back.
I don't care. They screwed me and I'm going back.
When it's morning?
No. Immediately.
So, through hellish conditions, raider encounters, and low ammo, she comes across her caravan as it finally caught up. She uses her diplomacy to get their help with her situation. In return, they get the jeep. She succeeds with the generous trade and spends the next few hours going back. She arrives at the checkpoint doors and replies,
You screwed me. The Jeep didn't have a full tank. Now I want a second one with a full tank of gas after what you did.
To set the scene for you, these were all level 6 rangers, in full gear, in a huge group of about 30. They are well armed with 4 snipers and 2 minigun soldiers. The rest had rifles and revolvers. Dante comes to the door. It pretty much tells her the work was barely worth the Jeep, let alone gas, and she should be thankful. They argue further, and after a few failed diplomacy rolls, he got aggressive and said he'd shoot her if she doesn't leave. So, she left, and began carefully planning guerrilla warfare against the well-armed military base. She started by using her merchant connections to cut off trade to the base, aside from contaminated food and radiated water. She returned a few days later with her armed caravan and replied,
Alright, Dante. If you want healthy soldiers, you'll work with me. Now I want 4 jeeps and 4 full tanks of gas.
He chuckles and orders the soldier to fire warning shots at her. She immediately backs off and goes back to planning. Over the course of months, hours IRL, she then learned that trade wasn't good at all at the Ranger faction-ran settlements nearby, so she carefully began to fix all the problems of the Ranger-ran settlements, carefully replacing the law with armed merchants and kicking out the faction. With good trade of food, water, weapons, medicine, and the death of minor raiders causing problems, one by one, she toppled the Ranger-controlled towns in quick succession. She then cut off the trade fully. She then returned to the base with her caravan fully armed with pipe rifles and jury-rigged guns.
Alright, Dante. Now I want 8 jeeps and 8 full...
She is interrupted by the fire of 5 soldiers who took it first. Dante shouts, "Your caravan will die after all those acts of terrorism against us!" As 2 shots hit her immediately, knocking her health to bloodied quickly. A slaughter of a gunfight ensued. To the shock of the caravan, Dante's men mowed down their people with a superior weaponry and skill. Between frenzied Brahmin and fleeing merchants, Grandma grabbed an escaped Brahmin and immediately escaped with the rest of the fleeing people. I expected her to give up right then and there, since it nearly killed her character, and slaughtered the faction she newly began. She calmed them down and gave a speech, citing the new towns they took, booming trade, and their sheer numbers. She proclaimed it wasn't an act of power what the soldiers did, but an act of fear for what they accomplished. She promised them riches, doubling all they have already, and then some, if they continue to follow her lead. Otherwise, they made an enemy with the Rangers at this checkpoint for the rest of their lives. With a fantastic speech, point, and a few great rolls, they were on board one more time.
But now we are fighting differently,
she replies. Over the course of a few days, they finally cut power to the base and waged her war, in quick successions, surrounding while throwing crafted Molotov cocktails at generators, buildings, tanks, and tents. The men were far too busy in a total panic to fight them, and the fires, giving Grandma and the merchants more than enough time to retreat. Buying a scope for her rifle, Grandma focused on fitting the men for one final attack. Using the last of her crafting material, she made explosives and gave them to the men. Deciding on hiding herself on a nearby cliff, equipped with her trash bag ghillie suit, She stuck a large rusty pipe over the barrel of her rifle and went into place. Debuffed from contaminated food, water, and lack of sleep, low moral, and medical supplies, the soldiers were weak and low on health, and good rolls after all the bad stats were calculated. The merchants made their first move at attacking the entrance, shooting at guards at their posts in such high numbers that even with low damage, it was chipping away great amounts of damage each turn. With Molotovs to push the soldiers back and pipe bombs to blow the doors open, they breached the entrance and had full attention of the Rangers. They began to pull out the big guns. Except, unknown to them, Grandma began dropping the snipers with the help of her new scope. One after another, she began aiming at their guns, legs, and hands. With a stealth crit modifier, the ones who didn't die were too sick, crippled, and damaged to get proper shots on the merchants. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. The base fell to the level 1 Grandmom and a bunch of pipe rifle-toting merchant NPCs. From ammo to guns and gear, merchants began looting the place of everything it had left over. 2 rangers were left alive in the base, Dante and his bodyguard. As the place was looted, Grandma had the 2 men stripped of weapons and ammo, and then she said,
"Alright, Dante. Now I'm taking all the vehicles and all the gas."
Shocked and in complete dismay, he is tossed from his own base and given freedom to go to the next town without prosecution. Grandma explained she felt the best tactic for keeping enemies is fear. She wanted 2 alive to tell the tale of what happened at that base. Grandma left the base with all vehicles, from motorcycles, jeeps, to even water tankers. She had enough to make a hefty amount of money and repay the merchants. I was completely shocked at how I saw it all turn out. I've never had players go into this depth or level of petty determination and tactics. I expected her to go rogue and maybe steal from bad guys, or murder Hobo at the first realization of what Raiders factions were, but I didn't expect this. It took me an entire page, front to back of notes and tally marks for me to calculate all the insane amounts of XP she made. If I remember right, it leveled her up to 8, putting her 1 level above the group I was already playing with. Afterwards, Grandma then asked me to get her a glass of soda and said she'd like to play again, this time heading toward military bases on her way to Pennsylvania. I mentioned the other factions of Fallout lore and Enclave stuff specifically. She'd said they should have been purged the moment the Wasteland realized they existed. Her logic was that Vietnam was the moment she personally stopped trusting.
"They stopped being trustworthy after Agent Orange," she said.
The other player was told about Grandma suddenly curb-stomping his faction, and he was pretty shocked, but amused. He never expected his faction he worked so hard to build to get destroyed by one very tactical level 1 player, let alone my Grandma. He then set a bounty on her head, and one worse, put her above all other blunties, specifically one named Titan, a raider that takes pride of being number 1 in the most wanted, and would kill anyone that stole his spot. Oh my god, what just happened? Okay, if it isn't obvious, I don't know a thing about Fallout, other than what's obvious from the title itself. But this? Well, like the author said, this isn't as much a horror story as much as it was pure chaos. But from time to time, I believe we really need this. Nobody got hurt. I am sure everyone got a good laugh out of it in the end, and it is certainly one hell of a story to tell. I can tell you it was a delight reading through it. You go, pistol packing grandma. Before we end things for today, let us take a look at today's exhibition journal, where I display the fan art you make for this channel. Today's fan art is this beautiful mini, painted by the DV Ghost. This little bird on top of the lantern is actually a robin, which we have a lot of here, and I adore them. They're like adorable little guys. And speaking of lantern, this was made long before my lore videos. But it all fits very nicely together now, doesn't it? And my god, look at how detailed this is and how well painted it is. I could only dream of doing the same for my minis. Thank you so much for your fan art, or fan miniature? The DV Ghost. Their socials are displayed on screen. If you wish to submit any art of your own, you can do so by sending it to my email linked in my About section, or my Discord server, the link to which is in the description below. That all being said, I hope you enjoyed today's stories, and that I will see you again soon, for there are always more stories to be shared.